lasts for a relatively short period. So you can increase the carbon storage for about 10 years and then it's full and it cannot store any more, in effect. Whereas with peatland and trees, they keep sequestering carbon. So yes, better soil management would be great, but it isn't a substitute necessarily for planting woodland.
Thank you, Gary. Either of our other speakers like to respond on this topic at all?
Yeah, I would.
Catherine, right, go ahead.
Yep, so agree with what Gary's saying, and I'd also like to add that there's lots of work going on around, I think rewilding is the wrong term, but the project going on the Knepp estate in Sussex has got some really interesting findings. I finished the book about a month ago, and there's some incredibly interesting stuff there about how to, it's not let animals go wild, but allow them to graze in a much more natural way and be less intensive, and allow biodiversity to recover on its own. And so what they're finding and what the scientists are realizing is that a lot of our assumed information about where some of the rare species like to inhabit, e.g. woodlands and so on, it's actually that's the last place where they can survive. And what they actually prefer is scrub and that kind of stuff. So they're realizing that what we thought we had to do to conserve some of the rare species was the wrong thing. It was kind of survivable for them, but it wasn't their ideal habitat. And that allowing things to just happen is producing some really interesting results. And the Knepp estate is now making money from meat with very little input. So it's the animals live outside all year. They have no extra feed brought in. There are no vet bills or housing bills, all that kind of stuff. James Rebanks in the Lake District, he's been doing a lot of work on that as well, so that's probably more applicable to what we're doing in the Yorkshire Dales. And then permaculture, using permanent agriculture, has an awful lot to learn from as well.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, some good reading suggested there. I know I especially enjoyed reading Isabella Tree's Wilding about the Knepp estate. A great discussion of these sorts of issues. The next theme that I was going to move on to is something that's touched on in a number of the questions that have come forward. And I suppose it's mainly or initially a question for Rob. It's about lessons for other authorities. Craven District Council are making some progress. Does he have suggestions for other district councils or indeed for the National Park Authority about how to work better together? And I specifically have on the same theme, Councillor Kevin Foster from Richmondshire District Council, a question which would be for Gary, about how the peat restoration work that RDC has contributed to is being undertaken and what the benefits of that are. So Rob, would you like to speak for us on this first of all?
Sure. The question was about how to work better together. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay.
So across the district, I think the most important thing has been to reach out to as many different organisations and community groups as we possibly can. We've really made a big effort to do that, and I think that the Craven Climate Action Partnership is a fairly successful expression of that, and we do have we've covered the area of the district fairly well, both in terms of the geography and the range of different interests that there are, and possibly not quite as strong on business, which I'd like us to be better at doing, and I'd welcome some support and suggestions for how we might improve that. But certainly the partnerships allowed us to gauge support and develop ideas across the district that we might not otherwise have done. So that's been a really important thing for us to do. In terms of the council's work, I think that a really important thing that's happened in Craven, and I don't know whether it's happened elsewhere, it may have done, is that the departmental heads and others with management responsibility have all been invested in progressing the agenda. So that the folk responsible for the waste management department have genuinely invested some time and energy into thinking about how we could do things differently, and the strategic planning team have been very proactive about thinking about how we might design things so that people can live differently in the future, and those sorts of things. I think it's strongly embedded in management thinking throughout the council, so that there isn't a sort of specific carbon reduction team or anything like that. It's been a shared effort. Not saying that we're getting everything right by any means, and there's an awful lot still to do. But I think those two things, that one within the council and one across the partnership, the district area, have been particularly important.
Thank you. Gary, did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or any comments on working with RDC on peatland using the peatland restoration funds?
Yeah, I'll just talk on that latter point, Julia, if I can. So I think this is a reference to a project which we're just about to sort of launch, really, which is called the Tees Swale Naturally Connected project, which is a partnership between the National Park Authority and the North Pennines AONB partnership, with a very big heritage lottery grant, £5.7 million. It's an £8.5 million programme over 5 years, and we think it's probably the biggest nature recovery project in England, and it's got some fantastic support from a whole load of bodies, including Richmondshire District Council, Yorkshire Water, Northumbrian Water, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, the Environment Agency. I've probably forgotten some of this, but it's a great partnership, and I think the thing that makes it interesting, and Catherine mentioned the NEP estate and the fantastic work that they've been doing. What nobody's managed to do yet is look at building nature recovery across multiple holdings. You get one big estate who have an enlightened landowner and can do whatever they like. How do you do that in somewhere like the Dales, where you've got 1,000 different farmers, multiple different landowners? How do you join up that activity in a way that connects? And that's really what this project's looking at. And it's also looking about how do you make farming that does that viable as well. So that's just about to get underway. We're really excited about the project. It has a website if you want to go and look at that, but it's going to involve peatland restoration. It's going to involve hay meadow and grassland restoration, so the stuff that Nancy Steadman was talking about, and woodland planting, and alongside doing some stuff to help clean up some of the issues around lead pollution in some of the rivers in Swaledale. So it should be a really positive and interesting project. Some things won't work, I suspect, and we'll need to learn from them, but we're hopeful that it'll be a step in the right direction for nature recovery in the national park.
Thanks, Gary. Catherine, was there anything you wanted to add on these sorts of issues?
Sorry, yeah. I was going to send, I'd already made a note to send Gary a link to something that I'd read about indigenous tribes. I think it was in New Zealand. Well, I can't remember if it's New Zealand or Australia, but who've been burning for obviously centuries, but working with the local forestry to kind of burn in a different way, and burn in a way that's healthy for the woodlands and the ecosystems. And that actively helps regenerate the undergrowth. So I'll find the link to that and send it through. And if we want to share it more widely, obviously the Friends of the Dales could do that as well.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. The next area that I had questions on, and this may come back to you at least initially, Gary, but I think be interested in the views of all the speakers on it. A series of questions related to transport. So Sarah from AC Settle, can Gary say more about the possibility of reinstating railway lines? And Nancy Steadman, this is perhaps, well, perhaps we'll just stick with railway lines for the moment. The possibility of reinstating railway lines and what could be achieved through that, but perhaps also if people want to broaden out to what could be achieved through other transport measures. Gary?
Okay, well, the National Park Management Plan, which I mentioned before, has a specific objective in it around railways and also one about bus services as well. So we see both of those as being very important. I mean, clearly the issue here is primarily about cost, because we know that for all the benefits that rail travel can potentially bring, the fundamental costs of the physical works that would be needed, for example, to reinstate the Wensleydale Railway, theoretically all the way back across to Garsdale, but before that in kind of stages going westwards. It's a significant amount of money, and being able to make that case to Treasury when they're making judgments about investments based solely on financial criteria does make that very challenging. I mean, I think the fundamental issue around public transport and making that work effectively at the moment is that the government doesn't believe in public transport. And so there is no national coordination or drive towards a sensible, rational system. And I think that means that anything that we attempt to do locally is always going to be fighting against the grain, you know, until there's a kind of national push to say, actually, this is a good thing and a positive thing. We're going to do more of it. I think it's going to be a big challenge, and we cannot get to a point where we want people to leave their cars behind if they can't get to the national park without bringing their cars with them, and easily at that, because we know people won't. That people now will not sit around for 2 hours waiting for a train. It just won't happen. Society just isn't built like that anymore. So there's some big challenges there. We would love to see the Wensleydale Railway reopen. I would love to see Skipton Colne line reinstated. You know, there's big opportunities to bring people out from Manchester then to get to Skipton and out into the national park. But it's a massive challenge, and I don't know who's going to pay for it.
Yes, absolutely. And as one of the other commentators, Nancy Stedman, she's made the point about, well, she's actually said, government has relaxed planning constraints for barn conversions in remote locations. How is this compatible with the stated aims of reducing carbon impacts from travel? And I mean, this is one of the really key issues that we're going to be looking at in the local plan for the new local plan for the Yorkshire Dales. The spatial distribution of development, because that has such an effect on our transport needs. I'm not sure that we can have a lengthy discussion of that today, but
can I just say one thing on that, Julie? Sorry, just before you go on. I mean, I absolutely get that point. I think there is a bit of a counter argument though around the carbon that's already invested in those buildings. If you just let them fall down, that's a waste of resources as well. So I think there is a debate to be had about the pros and cons of allowing those buildings to be reoccupied, particularly if you've got a decent broadband service. That means the people who are living in them don't have to commute to work anymore, which is definitely starting to happen in parts of the national park, particularly the northwestern part of the national park, where you've got broadband for the rural north, providing a fantastic broadband service that does allow people to live and work inside the national park. And I think that could be a bit of a game changer for the economy.
Yeah. Would either of our other speakers like to comment on that issue? Rob, Catherine?
Well, only to mention that our council is in favour and is supporting the bid to reopen the Skipton to Colne line. I don't know how likely that is to happen anytime soon with the current funding situation, but just to add to Gary's point.
Thanks. Catherine, were you wanting to come in again?
Just to say that I think we're going to have to go towards more green taxes. It's ridiculous that we're taxing jobs and yet we don't tax the use of virgin resources or waste and pollution. So I'd like to see road pricing everywhere, and that might pay for more rail and public transport connections. So that's probably pretty radical. And then I agree with Gary's point about the barns. that we've already invested in those buildings. And I think what we need to do, and this could be something that could apply to an awful lot of national parks, is find ways to convert those old buildings in an energy efficient way. As Gary said, and I know this well because we've done a massive retrofit on our 1750s house, and unless you go back to really expensive stuff like lime and digging out your floors to put limecrete in, you can't make it breathable and energy efficient, and those retrofits are just too expensive for most people.
Yeah.
But I've seen schemes where there's kind of a like a modular house put inside a barn, so leaving an air gap and putting something up that's wooden and well insulated, and it's not destroying the fabric of the barn. So I think there are probably lots of ways that we could share experiences across the different national parks, and find ways to make affordable retrofits for people to do to either houses that they're already living in or conversions.
Thank you, Catherine. In a related area, I've had a number of questions about renewable energy, mainly along the lines of what are the best opportunities for further use of renewable energy within the Dales. Could we have more wind turbines? If so, where should they go? Battery use in future. I wondered if there were any particular insights from you, Catherine, or the other speakers on that one. Go ahead, Catherine.
There's some really interesting work being done at Cardiff University. It's an EU-funded project, but to create a building that's a power station in itself. And so they started with a little classroom, and now it's a kind of mini conference centre. And it doesn't look as if it's got solar panels on, but the solar panels are integrated into the building fabric. And so the building produces more than enough energy to power itself, do its own heating, lighting, and so on, as well as export energy back to the grid. And they're trying to develop solar panels that are circular, so they can be made back into new panels at the end of life or when better technology comes along. So I think there's a lot of developments that could make to make renewable energy available that doesn't have to impact on the aesthetics of the park.
Thanks, Catherine. Gary, did you have anything to add on that?
Well, yeah, a couple of things, I suppose. Just in terms of the sort of the small scale renewables and the stuff that Catherine was talking about there. I mean, obviously that's a really positive thing, and I'm sure we'd want to encourage more of that. I think there are some challenges around the grid, and actually, if people that are, in a lot of cases, we don't have the capacity to deal with more renewable energy being generated, and then it's incredibly expensive to upgrade the grid to enable the system to work. You can tell from the way I'm talking, I'm not an expert on this, but there are some biggies there. I mean, again, it's a huge issue with this, isn't it? The best place to generate wind energy is on the top of the hills. And the top of most of the hills in this country are national parks or areas of outstanding natural beauty. So you've immediately got a fundamental conflict there, that as a society we have to make some judgment about. I mean, I think at the moment my feeling is that we shouldn't put wind turbines all over the top of hills in national parks and AONBs, but whether that'll always be the case is another question. There's certainly capacity to get a lot more small scale renewable energy in the national park. We did have a sort of flurry of hydro schemes, small scale hydro at one time, and then the subsidy system changed, and that kind of finished it off. There is still scope to do a lot more of that, and as you said, Julie, we're actively looking at that as part of producing the new local plan. So we'll certainly be wanting to get feedback from people about what they think in terms of how much renewable energy there should be in the national park.
Thank you, Gary. Now, I'm sorry, but I think I'm going to have to wrap things up at this point. And I'll hand back in a moment to Bruce, who will make a few concluding remarks and try and sum up. I mean, I think it's been a fantastic morning, and thank you so much to everyone for the questions, all the questions and comments. I've had lots of really useful comments here, and we'll have to keep a note of those and see if we can make further use of them. We also had the request from a number of people, can the slides be sent to all participants? So I hope that that's something that we can look to doing. But I'll hand back to you at this point, Bruce, to finish off. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'm not going to sum up because there's really too much to think about here, but I do want to thank Gary, Rob, and Catherine for their extremely stimulating and I thought inspiring presentations. I think you'll all agree there's an awful lot to mull over here, hopefully setting us on our way towards a Green New Deal. It is definitely possible. But I have to say, there's one thing is this changing the mindset really sort of stuck with me. I think it was something that Catherine brought up. And speaking of changing mindsets, circular economics and reputations, I'd just like to bang my own personal drum here, but also to recall Judy Rogers' suggestion regarding a plastic-free zone. Can we please include plastic tree guards to the plastic-free zone? Every time we have a presentation or there's a photograph of tree planting, all I see are plastic litter. So, you know, and I think this surely fits the National Park's objective to reduce waste.
I used that picture deliberately to antagonize you, Bruce. Sorry.
You know, I thought so, Gary. Antagonism acknowledged. In any case, I think there's anyway. I'll be nice to Gary and say if anyone has an electric helicopter to donate, please get in touch with Gary. Right after this would be probably most convenient. Okay, I would also like to thank Julie Martin for doing such an admirable job chairing. She makes it look effortless. Round of applause, we can do that, you know, there we go. And to Jules Hargreaves for her technical support. Finally, a huge thanks to all of you for attending on a Saturday morning, although it's been a rainy Saturday morning, so you didn't have anything better to do, I know. But for all the questions and the comments. John Asher and I look forward to welcoming you back for a second round on the 17th of October, where we will indeed continue this important conversation. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Bruce and John, for initiating this on behalf of everybody. I think I can say that. It's been very interesting.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, and so yeah, round of applause to everyone here and to everyone who participated. Thank you very much.
See you soon.
I don't know who closes the meeting, but I guess I'll close the meeting or the conference. All right, see you on the 17th.
See you.